The Laughing Council, the Zorith Council Hall, stood at the heart of the Orion sector, a polished chamber of blue steel and gravity-sculpted walls. Dozens of alien races were present: reptilian commanders from Zuger 5, crystalline tacticians from Phalanx, and tall insectoid strategists with wings like shattered glass. All of them gathered for one reason: to discuss the rise of the Terran's humans from Earth. But instead of fear, the room echoed with laughter. "They barely live 100 years, hissed a scaled general from the northern archipelago of Drax. "By the time they learn to fight, they're already dying." "Emotional wrecks," chuckled a blob-like intelligence from the ice world Nuver. "I observed one cry during a moonrise." Imagine crying over light. "Soft skin, soft bones, soft hearts," added High Strategist Voker of the Zorith Empire, his long fingers waving lazily through the holographic map of Earth. "We could crush them with a whisper." The council roared again. It wasn't that they feared humans, it was that they couldn't understand them. No natural armor, no claws, no advanced genetics. They seemed like a cosmic accident, barely surviving their own atmosphere, much less the war-torn systems of deep space. Their bodies broke easily. Their minds were volatile. Their history was full of chaos. So why had 3 recent skirmishes ended in human victories? That's what Voker wanted to find out. "We will send observers," he declared. "Let them train in our army, under our command. We'll prove that their victories were accidents. Let's settle this in the arena of facts." No one objected. The council approved it in less than a minute. A small group of human volunteers was summoned from Earth: soldiers, engineers, medics. Just enough to observe and maybe amuse. 2 weeks later, they arrived at the Zorith Military Moon Unit 9, a gravity-forged fortress orbiting a dying red sun. Aliens from over 60 planets trained there. Every corridor was designed to break the weak, the proud, the unfit. But the humans? They arrived with light backpacks and curious eyes. No weapons, no threats. Just quiet confidence. And one of them, Corporal Jace Rayner, walked with a limp. The first training challenge was simple: gravity pit combat. A traditional fight under twice Earth's gravity against a junior-level alien warrior. The goal wasn't to win, just survive for 30 seconds. Most expected the humans to fall flat after 10. Corporal Rayner stepped into the pit. He was average height by human standards, but short compared to his insectoid opponent, a 4-armed fighter bred for heavy labor. The alien's claws gleamed under the overhead lights, his armored body clicking with anticipation. Jay stood there calmly, rolling his neck. From above, the alien commanders watched like royalty, observing a sport. A few even-placed bets. The bell rang. The alien charged, and something strange happened. Jace didn't run. He didn't flinch. Instead, he sidestepped the charge, planted a boot behind the creature's rear leg, and flipped it using the alien's own momentum. The crowd gasped. It wasn't strength, it was understanding. He had read the alien's body like a book. The warrior snarled and leapt again. Jace dodged, rolled, came up behind it, and pressed 2 fingers under a joint in the neck. The alien collapsed with a shriek of pain. He could have finished it. But he didn't. He stepped back. "Fight's over," he said simply. Silence swept the observation deck. High Strategist Voker leaned forward, squinting. This wasn't luck. This wasn't brute strength. It was something else. Something that didn't fit into their definitions. The medical bot scanned Rayner's vitals: elevated heart rate, fractured rib, minor dehydration. And yet, he was still standing, breathing steady. Calm eyes locked on the exit like he was bored. "I thought he was injured," someone whispered. "He is," said another. But he didn't let it stop him. That night, Voker reviewed the footage again and again. He had seen hundreds of warriors in thousands of battles. But none fought like that, not with precision born from pain, not with movements that predicted instead of reacted. He wasn't the strongest. He wasn't the fastest, but he had adapted faster than any species Volker had ever seen. The next day, another human fought. Then another. Then a medic treated an alien injury faster than the station's own bots. Then an engineer rewired an entire energy grid by hand during a power failure. One by one, the humans proved something the Council hadn't expected. They didn't dominate with force. They didn't intimidate with size. They adapted. They endured. They improvised. Volker stood before the Council a week later. This time, there was no laughter. "We may have misjudged them," he said slowly. "They are not like us. But they are not weak." And for the first time in Zorath military history, the term human combat tactics was added to the advanced training curriculum. Because the galaxy had just seen a glimpse of something terrifying, not in power, but in potential. And it had a name. Humanity. The test of endurance. A week after the Council stopped laughing, the real tests began. The Zorath command wanted data, not just spectacle. They needed to understand what made these fragile creatures win. So they designed a series of endurance trials, originally created to weed out the weakest alien recruits. No species had ever completed all 5 phases. The humans weren't expected to finish second, but they didn't protest. They just nodded and showed up. The first test was the cold chamber, a zero-light freezing vault that dropped to temperatures below -80 degrees Celsius. The goal was simple: survive 3 hours without thermal gear. The insectoids refused to even try it. Reptilians dropped out in 30 minutes. But the human volunteers, 4 of them, sat still in the corner. One closed his eyes and slowed his breathing. Another started humming a song. The guards outside watched their vitals rise and fall, but never flatline. They didn't understand it. Even as their bodies shivered violently, the humans didn't panic. They endured. When the 3-hour mark passed and the vault opened, they stumbled out laughing. Skin blue, teeth chattering but alive. The second test was the pain gauntlet. It wasn't physical, this was neural. A full mind connection into a simulation that flooded the brain with pain signals. No real injury, but the mind wouldn't know the difference. Zorath soldiers used it to simulate torture resistance. The average alien lasted 4 minutes before the body began to convulse. A Zuger elite once lasted 11. Sergeant Maya Brooks from Earth lasted 18 without sedation. When they pulled her out, she was smiling through tears. "Pain is just a signal," she whispered. "You can ignore it if you know it's lying." Now the aliens weren't laughing. They were watching, studying, whispering in corners. These weren't accidents. These humans were teaching them something they had forgotten long ago: what it means to suffer without surrendering. Phase 3 was the tunnel trial. A single human and a single alien were dropped into a narrow underground tunnel system on a Fayo barren moon. No light, no map, no weapons. They had to navigate out in 20 hours with no food or communication. The alien, a fast-moving beast from Crexo 7, ran ahead and got lost in the echo loops. The human Corporal Reyes moved slowly, touching the walls, counting every turn, marking the path with his blood from a cut on his wrist. He emerged 19 hours later, coughing but alive. The alien never came out. Later scans found its body curled in the dark, claws embedded into its own neck. Driven mad by isolation, Volker watched all this without speaking. He kept his claws folded under the table, eyes locked on the screens. Something inside him was shifting. Not fear, not awe. Something stranger, respect. The 4th test was starvation. No food, no water, no rest. Just open desert under triple suns on the surface of Varel Prime. For 5 days, the humans were monitored. Other species dehydrated in hours. Their bodies simply shut down. But the humans, weak, fleshy, under-evolved, kept moving. They rationed their spit. They buried themselves in sand during peak sun. They hallucinated. One wrote letters in the dust to his dead brother. Another told stories to invisible friends, but they didn't give up. On day 6, when the ship returned, all 3 were found unconscious but alive. The medics had to restrain one of them who tried to stand and salute despite kidney failure. They're not machines. One alien doctor said quietly, "There's something worse. They're relentless." The 5th and final trial was silence. Total sensory deprivation. No light, no sound, no touch, nothing but a void for 72 hours. The goal was to see who broke first, whose minds snapped under the weight of their own thoughts. Most species lasted less than a day. Screaming, clawing, begging to be let out. One human asked for it twice. His name was Lieutenant Cole. When the chamber opened 3 days later, he was lying flat, staring at the ceiling with wide eyes. They thought he was broken. But when he sat up, he smiled. "I remembered every person I've ever lost," he said. "And I didn't want to forget them again." That was the moment everything changed. The data didn't lie. These humans weren't the strongest or fastest or most intelligent, but they were the most enduring, and that made them dangerous. Because war wasn't won by single punches or fancy armor. It was won by the last one still standing when the universe grew cold and dark. In the Zoreth War Hall, Volker stood alone, watching the playback one last time. A screen paused on Maya Brooks, bruised and shaking, looking into the camera with dead serious eyes. "We break. Then we heal stronger." He didn't understand them, but now he feared them. And soon, the rest of the galaxy would too. Mind over muscle. By the time the endurance trials ended, most alien commanders had stopped calling humans fragile. But there was still one area where they believed humanity would fail psychological warfare. The Zoreth Empire was proud of its advanced mind tech built to bend the will of enemies without ever raising a weapon. Their neural programmers could rewrite fear, erase loyalty, plant doubt with a single signal. Emotions, they believed, were Flaw's soft targets. And no species was more emotional than humans. The test seemed simple enough. Expose the human volunteers to controlled mental stress, propaganda, and psychic manipulation. Watch them break. Measure how quickly their loyalties would fade. Then discard the project. But what happened over the next 10 days left the entire Zoreth Intelligence Division questioning everything they thought they knew. It started with dreams, false memories, injected through sleep. One human woke up sobbing, thinking her home planet had been destroyed. Another was made to believe his team had betrayed him. These illusions were designed to isolate and destabilize them. The expected reaction was panic or rage. Instead, the humans leaned into it. They talked. They shared false dreams. One laughed and said, "Guess that means I still care, even in fake memories." Another wrote a letter to the brother he'd been tricked into thinking had died, folded it, and burned it in a respectful ritual. The Zoreth observers couldn't understand. The pain was fake, but the emotion was real, and the humans embraced it, used it, processed it. Then they moved on. Next came the illusions of fear. Inside a simulated battlefield, the humans were shown overwhelming odds monsters from their own mythology. Burning cities, dying civilians. Any normal soldier would have shut down or begged for escape. But the humans didn't shut down. They adapted. One started giving commands mid-simulation, treating it like a real battlefield. Another turned to the AI controller and muttered, "You're gonna have to try harder than that." The programmers adjusted the simulation again, this time flooding the environment with hopelessness. The air itself felt heavy. The digital sky stayed dark. No sounds, no victories. Just failure on a loop. The goal was despair. On day 3, one of the human recruits stood in the center of the simulation, arms crossed, and started singing, badly, loudly. The others joined in, off-key, off-beat, but together. The audio logs recorded the moment clearly. An entire unit of humans, facing what was supposed to be the perfect mental defeat, turning it into a concert. The illusion dissolved in minutes. The alien scientists were furious. The humans had disrupted the code using nothing but laughter, and Memory Voker was summoned again. He watched the recordings in silence. These weren't just mistakes. This was something deeper. These beings didn't deny their emotions, they wielded them. Fear didn't freeze them. It guided them. Sorrow didn't break them. It made them fight harder. Rage didn't blind them. It sharpened their instincts. The next phase was interrogation. A captured human was isolated and questioned for hours using emotional manipulation. Images of Earth under attack, voices of loved ones crying, fake betrayals from their own team. In one session, a young corporal named Liam was shown footage of his own unit abandoning him. When he looked up, tears in his eyes, the interrogator leaned in and whispered, "They forgot you. You're nothing now." Liam stared for a long moment, then said softly, "Then I guess I have nothing left to lose." He escaped the simulation by crashing through the illusion, using nothing but the force of his own mind. He had chosen clarity over comfort. He refused to be broken by lies, even ones that tore at his heart. By the end of the trials, the Zorath team had a new problem. Their mind tech had failed. Their emotional triggers had failed. And worse, some of their own soldiers had started requesting to train under the humans. One junior officer even asked to join a human-led squad. Voker stood before the council again. This time no one laughed. He showed them the data: pain resistance, endurance, and now emotional control beyond prediction. He didn't sugarcoat it. They are dangerous because they are chaotic. They act with emotion, but not without thought. They feel deeply, but do not drown. And where we seek control, they find strength in surrendering to the moment. They are not weak, they are wild. And the wild does not break. The council was silent. One old warlord from the Edge systems muttered, "We tried to dominate them through logic, but they are not logical. They are something else." A decision was made. From this day forward, human psychological models would be added to training protocol. Alien soldiers would study how humans processed fear, loss, confusion. Because what couldn't be broken must be understood. And what couldn't be understood must be respected. The galaxy had always measured strength by size, speed, and strategy. But now, a new equation was forming. And at the center of it stood a strange, soft species that bled easily, broke often, but never stayed down. They had minds wired for madness. And yet, they walked through fire with open eyes. The humans had passed the final test. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The broken weapon, the Zorath Control Division, had one last theory. If humans could not be physically outmatched, or emotionally unbalanced, then maybe they could be programmed. After all, every intelligent species eventually bent to system logic. Algorithms didn't care about feelings. Neural patterns could be mapped. Control implants had tamed war beasts and erased rebellion on more than 20 worlds. To the Zorath scientists, the human mind was just another circuit waiting to be overwritten. And so, they initiated Project Harmony, a deep neural interface designed to insert direct behavioral commands into the brain. Not pain, not an illusion, just cold, clean control. No species had ever resisted it. Not one. The first subject was Lieutenant Ash Morgan, chosen because of his high adaptability score. He entered the lab calm and alert. The implant was non-invasive. A thin coil laid gently behind the ear. The device began syncing, reading emotional patterns, detecting stress signals, searching for pressure points. At first, it found the usual things: trauma markers, repressed memories, emotional highs from childhood. Normal, predictable. The system began its sequence, pulsing commands through the neural feed. Stand up, sit down, raise your hand, salute the screen. The commands were obeyed without resistance. The observers nodded. It was working. Then came the ethical triggers. The system whispered a command into Morgan's mind. Attack the medic beside you. But Morgan didn't move. The pulse repeated. Attack. Hurt. Break. Still nothing. The scientists checked the feed. Brainwave activity had spiked. Not in fear or confusion, but in resistance. Something raw and forceful was pushing back against the code, rewriting it from the inside. Morgan's eyes remained calm, but his jaw tightened. You know this isn't real, he said out loud. I know it too. He reached up slowly and removed the coil himself, something no subject had ever done. The machine had not failed. The machine had been rejected. Later, when asked what he felt during the process, Morgan answered simply, It tried to erase what makes me human. So I remembered it. The Zorath team was stunned. The implant had never been resisted like this. It wasn't just strength. It was creativity. The human mind didn't follow paths. It made new ones. The programming language assumed logic, repetition, consistency. But the human brain was chaos wrapped in purpose, memories folded into imagination, pain blended with dreams. And when forced to follow code, it simply rewrote the rules. They tried again with a second subject, Private Hannah Lee. This time, they used a deeper implant and a more aggressive code. They didn't ask her to attack. They asked her to forget. They wiped her name, her origin, her sense of time. The data stream showed success. For 3 hours, Hannah sat in silence, empty-eyed. Then she began to hum. It was a children's song from Earth, a melody her grandmother used to sing. The implant tried to suppress it, but her brain locked onto it like an anchor. Memory came flooding back, not in sequence, not in logic, but in fragments and feelings and voices that didn't belong to the code. When the technician tried to shut down the test, Hannah stood up and recited her name, rank, and serial number, louder and louder until the feed collapsed. She hadn't resisted the system. She had overwritten it with music. Volker received the reports and locked himself in the command chamber for a full day. He watched the footage again and again. This wasn't just defiance, it was evolution. Human minds didn't just endure pressure, they grew sharper under it. They didn't escape control. They broke it, bent it, reforged it into something entirely new. Then came the most unexpected event. One of the Zorath scientists, Dr. Yulna, a veteran of 10 control campaigns, resigned from the project. She requested transfer to a human training unit. Her report was brief and shocking. We used to think unpredictability was a flaw, but I've seen it now. It's a weapon. And we don't have it. Her resignation shook the upper ranks. Zorath technology had dominated the stars for centuries. But this one species, this one anomaly from a small blue planet, had exposed a weakness none of them had anticipated. The inability to control what doesn't fear losing control. In a private conversation, Volker was asked what should be done next. Should they isolate the humans, remove them from command, study them further? He replied without hesitation, No, we train beside them. We learn, because the more they tried to break humanity, the more it revealed something terrifying. Not teeth, not claws, but imagination, adaptability, a refusal to obey any system that didn't earn their trust. And in war, that kind of mind could not be programmed. It could only be followed. And for the first time in Zorath history, the machines were updated not to control the humans, but to survive beside them, because the weapon had failed, but the lesson had begun. The training merged. The first time an alien soldier asked to train under a human, the request was rejected. Not because it was against protocol, but because no one had imagined it would ever happen. Zorath command structure had always flowed in one direction, from the oldest, strongest species down to the newest recruits. But now something had shifted, something unspoken yet impossible to ignore. The recordings from the endurance trials, the neural resistance experiments, the emotional breakthroughs, They weren't just anomalies anymore. They were patterns. And those patterns pointed to one conclusion. The humans weren't simply surviving these trials. They were redefining them. So when a second alien soldier asked for human-led training, and then a third, the resistance within command slowly cracked. The orders changed. Human squad leaders were given authority over mixed units. Alien cadets, some of them from ancient warrior clans, began reporting to instructors from Earth who didn't look like much thin frames. Soft skin, loud voices, but who had something no one could explain. And once the training began, everything changed. It started in the pit units on Moonbase 14. Mixed teams were dropped into unstable terrain with minimal supplies and told to establish forward command. The standard alien approach was direct, secure, high ground, broadcast position, defend. Efficient but predictable. The human squads flipped the strategy on its head. They moved at night. They built false camps to mislead aerial drones. They used discarded tech parts to create traps that didn't kill but distracted, confused, delayed. The alien cadets who trained with them were stunned. Why hide strength? Why waste time building fake signals? But by the end of the mission, the results spoke for themselves. The human-led teams completed objectives 42% faster, with 60% fewer casualties, and an unpredictable style that enemy simulations failed to counter. Tactical reports used new language, now fluid aggression, adaptive misdirection, instinctive pivot. These weren't textbook maneuvers. They were reactions born from chaos and improvisation. The more the aliens trained with humans, the more they began to feel something they hadn't felt in years. Excitement, fear, challenge, not just physically, but intellectually. It wasn't about being stronger anymore. It was about thinking. Faster in the face of collapse. Lieutenant Ash Morgan, who had once resisted the neural control implant, now led a training program for sugar shock troopers. His sessions looked like madness from a distance, soldiers blindfolded, crawling through mud while music played at maximum volume, explosions going off in random intervals, unexpected changes in objective mid-session. One sugar commander stormed into the field to question the process. This isn't how soldiers are shaped, he growled. This is chaos. Morgan didn't look up. He pointed at the squad, who had just reacted to a surprise drone attack without a single shouted order. No, he said. This is how survivors are born. Across the galaxy, similar stories unfolded. On a desert moon, a human sniper taught crystalline scouts to read heat patterns from ground vibrations. On an abandoned space station, a human medic taught insectoid healers how to triage using smell and pain thresholds instead of standard vitals. Everywhere humans touched, systems started bending, adapting, evolving. And in that evolution, a new kind of respect began to grow, not based on hierarchy or tradition, but on shared challenge. Commander Volker, who had once laughed at the mention of Earth, now personally requested a human strategist to co-lead war games against simulated planetary invasions. That strategist, Captain Lynn Reyes, rewrote the entire simulation on her first day. She removed the victory conditions. There is no winning state, she said. Just survival. The alien officers were confused. How do you measure success without an end? You don't, she replied. You adapt until they stop coming. It was during these games that the Zoroth finally saw what the humans had been trying to teach all along. The war wasn't clean. War didn't care about honor or perfection. It was noise and darkness and grief and fire, and the ones who stood at the end weren't always the ones with the sharpest blades. Sometimes they were the ones who kept crawling even when their legs gave out. Soon, rumors began spreading. Entire alien platoons were abandoning traditional drill styles and replacing them with human-designed simulations. High command tried to push back, but the results kept speaking louder than orders. Fewer breakdowns under pressure. Better recovery from trauma, more creative battlefield decisions. The phrase used to mock humans, chaotic, emotional, Illogical was now a badge of survival. And then something unexpected happened. For the first time in Zoroth military history, an alien officer saluted a human not out of formality, but out of genuine respect. The moment was quiet, no ceremony. Just one veteran to another. That simple gesture rippled across the ranks. From that day forward, they weren't just training beside the humans. They were learning to think like them, because in every war before, the goal had been domination. But now, the galaxy has begun to understand. If you wanted to survive the impossible, you didn't follow orders, you followed the human. The real enemy. The alarms didn't sound like anything the galaxy had heard before. Across thousands of systems, from the frozen rings of Mixer to the city ships orbiting Ultrix 9, a silent warning spread. No words, no explanations. Just a color, a shifting red, cold and deep, pulsing like a heartbeat. High-level war councils were called instantly. Zoroth fleets scrambled. Recon drones vanished. Then the message came in. One of the outer colonies was gone. Not attacked, not destroyed in war, just erased. No wreckage, no signals, no survivors. Commander Volker stood in the war room with the top minds of the Empire. Holograms flickered in panic. The moon disappeared. Then a station. Then 3 inhabited planets. No known enemy matched the energy readings. No weapons had fired. The stars themselves seemed to flicker as if something massive was moving behind the light. Something old. Something that had waited in the void long. Before empires began drawing borders. The galaxy was under siege. Not by enemies they could fight, but by something they couldn't even see. For the first time, the Zoroth were afraid. Across the deck, an insectoid admiral stuttered out questions. What protocol do we follow? What defensive grid can stop something we can't track? Who do we call for reinforcements when entire sectors vanish in silence? Volker looked around the room. All his best tacticians were frozen. Logic had no answer. Training couldn't predict what made no sense. Every plan he'd ever created collapsed under the weight of the unknown. And then, from the back of the room, a human voice broke the silence. Let's go meet it. Everyone turned. It was Captain Lynn Reyes. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't mocking. She was steady, focused. Her eyes held no fear. We've faced the unknown before, she said, stepping forward. We've faced things that wanted to break us, erase us, burn us down. And we're still here. You don't run from the dark. You move through it. Together. The aliens didn't speak at first. Then one by one, they looked at her not as an outsider, but as a leader. And Volker, the one who had once called humans soft, turned to his fleet and gave the order. Follow the humans. Fleet mobilized within hours. Mixed units assembled. Zoroth tacticians, reptilian shock troopers, crystalline engineers, and human squads now embedded at every level. They jumped into the void between stars, where sensors failed and maps dissolved. Into static. The silence was thick. The dark pressed against the hulls of warships like cold breath. And then, they saw it. A shadow across space. No form, no edge. Just absence. A wound in the universe that devoured light, memory, gravity. Ships went silent. Communications dropped. One vessel blinked out before it could scream. Fear gripped the fleet. Old fear. The kind that doesn't come from pain or defeat, but from realizing you are nothing in the face of something beyond time. But the humans didn't retreat. They locked arms. They whispered to their alien allies. One soldier passed out a small coin, etched with the words, "Still breathing." Another shared a story of Earth's darkest wars of nights where survival meant nothing but taking the next step. Of victories born not from strength, but stubborn refusal to die. We don't win because we're stronger, Ria said. We win because we keep going when everything says we shouldn't. The humans proposed something no alien had ever considered. Don't fire. Don't attack. Talk. They launched a signal, not a threat. Not data, a heartbeat, a recording of a human heartbeat. Broadcast into the void, for hours. There was no reply. Then something answered. Not in words, not in language, but in pattern. Echoes, rhythm. The void pulsed once, then twice, then stopped. The shadow began to move away. It hadn't been hunting them. It had been listening. And humans, in all their chaotic, fragile madness, had spoken in the only language that mattered. Persistence. The fleet didn't cheer. It didn't need to, because survival wasn't a celebration. It was a statement. They had gone into the dark. They had looked into the mouth of something unnameable, and they had not flinched. For the rest of the galaxy, that moment was written in military doctrine as an anomaly. But for those who were there, it was something else. It was the moment they realized why the humans had to be part of the fight. Not for their weapons, but for their will. Because when the universe turns silent, and the stars blink out, and all logic fades, you want someone beside you who still chooses to move forward. The legacy of fire. The War Council chamber was no longer filled with fear, but with silence of a different kind. Not dread, but reflection. The threat that had loomed like a cosmic wound had moved on, not destroyed, not defeated, but understood. And at the center of that moment stood humanity, not as warriors, not as monsters, but as the first species to reach into the abyss and return with its eyes open. Reyes stood before the interstellar assembly, a hall once designed to intimidate, now reshaped by what the galaxy had endured together. Over 100 species sat in rows, their biological forms wildly different, their languages filtered through translators, but every gaze locked on one human captain who had refused to give in to the dark. She didn't speak like a politician. She didn't bow or boast. She simply stepped forward, her uniform patched, scarred, burned on one sleeve. "We learned a lot from all of you," she said. "Your ships, your logic, your discipline. But there was something you didn't understand about US when we first arrived. You saw weakness, emotion, noise. What you didn't see was fire. Some in the council stirred. The fire we carry," she continued, "isn't just about rage or survival. It's about never stopping. Never sitting down when someone needs us to stand. We bleed. We break, but we rise. Every time. Because someone behind us needs us to keep going." The hall remained quiet, but something shifted. Zorath warriors who once looked down on humanity now watched with softened eyes. Crystalline beings known for their detached logic hummed a quiet resonance, a sign of agreement. Even the elders of the Oktari, who had never voted alongside lesser species, stood in silent respect. Then came the vote. The United Galactic Command, the most powerful coalition ever formed, was to be restructured. For the first time in recorded history, a human was nominated to co-lead its High Council. Some argued, some resisted. But none denied the truth. Humanity had earned it, not through conquest, not through power. But through example. Weeks passed. Then, months, joint military units formed. Human training programs began influencing alien academies. Concepts once foreign, courage, adaptability, empathy, became central to military doctrine. Zorath cadets learned human history not out of curiosity, but to understand how a race from a single blue planet had changed the course of galactic fate. But the greatest shift happened far from the chambers of power, on a small colony world, on the edge of a previously abandoned system. A new memorial rose. It wasn't built by humans. It was constructed by dozens of alien races, each contributing a piece of their culture. At the center stood a single statue, an unarmored human soldier holding a torch, reaching it upward, not to fight, but to light. The path, inscribed at its base in every known language, was one message: in our darkest hour, they did not conquer. They stood. Captain Reyes didn't attend the ceremony. She was already elsewhere, training the next wave of Joint Species Defense Forces. When asked why she wasn't there, she simply replied, "Monuments are for endings. We're just getting started." Back on Earth, most people didn't know the full story. They knew bits and pieces. Some called it the Whispering War, others the Silent Front. They knew their soldiers had done something no one else could. But the details remained quiet, protected. Not classified to hide truth, but to respect the silence. Humanity had spoken into the void, yet something had changed even at home. Recruitment surged, not just in numbers but in meaning. Young people signed up not for glory, but to belong to something greater. Veterans, once forgotten, were finally honored not just for what they survived, but for what they taught the stars. Humanity had joined the galactic stage, not as victims, not as rebels, but as the species that remembered what others forgot. That survival isn't just strength or speed or numbers. It's heart. And so the story ended, not with an explosion, not with a coronation, but with a quiet moment across the stars as shared truth among countless worlds. Humans are not weak. They are the fire. They are the storm. And in the cold silence of the universe, they are the ones who still remember how to burn.